Today we're talking about an American-made Glock clone. It is the Lonewolf Lightweight Tactical Defender 19, the LTD19. Are you ready? Stand by. Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel. I'm David and I'll be your guide in pursuit of practical pistol proficiency. So on deck today is the LTD19 from Lonewolf. Lonewolf, as you're probably aware, is one of the Glock aftermarket parts makers who is now offering complete pistols for sale on their website. Some of you may be looking at this pistol and say, hey, that looks like a collection of parts they already make assembled into a complete pistol they're now offering up for sale, and you'd be partly right. And the value proposition for this gun that comes on offer is the Timberwolf grip, which has a more natural grip angle for pretty much every other gun in the market that's not made in Austria, as well as enhanced slide work that moves the center of balance from the slide from being kind of roughly right here on a standard Austrian to all the way kind of back here over the trigger guard, which is where you'd want it. And more importantly, they've managed to lower the weight to just 19.5 ounces. And for those of you following along from the early days of YouTube, when Nothing Fancy was one of the only things you could watch, that's 4 ounces lighter than the Austrian Glock 19 Gen 3, which is a 20% reduction in weight. And it actually does influence how the gun is carried in the holster on your belt. It doesn't pull down your pants quite as bad as a standard Glock 19 would, which is pretty cool. And to put that in perspective, this is only half an ounce heavier without a magazine than a Glock 48. And immediately you're probably thinking, because I was too, did that make the gun harder to shoot? Because the skinny, lighter guns generally have more recoil than the heavier guns, and we'll touch on that in a bit. And for you Glock guys, there's actually some Glock geekery going on with this thing, and we'll touch on that here in a bit too. The LTD19 will be available directly from Lonewolf's website for $699, and that's going to place it about $100 less from other iron-sighted Gucci Glock clones like the Shadow Systems MR920, the Zevo Z9, and the Faxon FX9, all costing significantly more than the Lonewolf LTD19. If you want to support the channel, check out the links in the description, specifically my Patreon, which is just $1 a month for 3 to 5 unique posts per week, as well as a link to join Big Daddy Unlimited, which is a buyer's club for Second Amendment stuff, where $1 gets you your first month and you'll get access to the best prices on the internet for things you probably find interesting. So for those of you who are new to the channel, I like to do reviews in the same format every time. You can hover over the time scale and generally skip around on the parts that are of interest to you, but I always start with things that I don't like because every gun has little quirks that aren't exactly right, even in the golden age of firearms that we're in. So let's talk about the dislikes. So first and foremost, the LTD19. I have kind of some philosophical differences as to what a Gucci Glock should be, and that really kind of drives the criticism that I'm about to throw out at the gun. I do quite like the gun. If you stick around, you'll see all of the praise that I'll heap upon the gun, but just talking first about some of my quirks with the gun. So right off the bat, this is 2021, and we are closer to the age of the Jetsons than we are the Flintstones. So why are we offering pistols that do not have optic mounts at this day and age? So I desperately wish that this had a red dot optic mount, because I would probably consider using this as my everyday carry gun because it is so light and the frame is so controllable. So the next gripes kind of all run together. There's a couple places on the pistol where Gucci Glocks, in my opinion, take what a Glock fails to do out of the box and sort of elevates it into the realm of acceptable, if not quite good. And that is going to start with the sights. It comes with plastic Glock U-notch sights, which I'm not a huge fan of. I know all 12 of you guys out there tell me you shoot them fine. I still don't believe you, but you're out there. And I also understand the argument that if you put more expensive sights on here, they'd have to raise the cost of the pistol. And I would probably still cry that they aren't Dawson Precision sights because those are the best sights in the game. Yeah, that's also true, but at the same time, I have plenty of pistols that have shipped with acceptable sights that I haven't monkeyed with just because it wasn't worth the squeeze to go to the best from good enough. And the next issue is sort of similar to that, is the Glock triggers are sort of uninspiring out of the box. And From what I can tell, this is made from the Lonewolf kind of aftermarket Glock clone parts. This trigger is basically exactly like a Glock 19 Gen 3 trigger. It's not as bad as a standard Glock 19 because the Timberwolf frame does give you a little bit more purchase and allows you to get a little bit more finger into the guard when you're grabbing it. But using like an aftermarket flat trigger shoe or something that just kind of screams like this is a premium product at the number 2 most important place that the user is going to interface with the gun is generally a good idea if you're commanding a premium price point. And my last complaint with it is it only ships with 1 magazine. Now it is an OEM Glock 19 15 round magazine, which is a great magazine. However, it'd be cool if maybe there were PMags and it came with 2 of them. So initial impressions, if I handed you this gun at the bench at the range, you'd pick it up, you'd hold it, you'd feel it, you'd manipulate it. It would feel like a duty grade pistol. Everything feels in order on the gun and you would appreciate the extra slide cuts, and that's effectively what the gun is. It's basically a gussied up Glock 19 Gen 3. The trigger is very much a Glock 19 Gen 3 trigger. It's not going to turn any heads in the safe area. However, the slide work is, in my opinion, quite cool. And it comes in a gun caboodle just like most guns on the market today. However, it is a clone of the Glock case as well, which makes me sad because the Glock case is probably the worst one going. But it does come with a Lonewolf sticker and a Lonewolf PVC patch on the inside, which is kind of cool, in addition to the gun lock that you will throw away and never look back with. So all in all, the initial impressions are pretty solid. I mean, it feels like a premium gun. It feels like a dressed up, elevated Glock 19, which is exactly what a Gucci Glock is. The gun comes with the Timberwolf compact frame, which many people have asked me to kind of check out, and I never have. And now that I have to say I quite like it. One thing that's noticeable right out of the box with these kind of Glock clone Glocks is that the polymer never feels quite right. Not quite like the OG Glock material. This is as close as it's come in my hands to feeling that way. But of more interest is going to be the grip angle. The grip angle is more in line with what everybody else is doing in the pistol segment. So a lot of people who may compete or like to shoot bigger guns that don't have a Glock grip angle want that Glock reliability without the Glock grip angle, and the Timberwolf frame actually does that in spades. It is quite a comfortable frame. It has enough of a beaver tail on it that your hand won't get chewed up by the slide, as well as more relief up under the trigger guard, so you can actually get very high on the frame. And the contour of the grip tang is actually quite good, where it feels more natural. It doesn't feel quite as blocky as a traditional Glock grip, but I've been competing with 2011s recently and the sights point pretty much perfectly with that grip angle, so I do quite like how the gun points. The grip texture itself is okay. It's about like a Gen 4 Glock if you've ever held one of those. And up front on the frame is a standard Glock rail with actually 2 slots for accessories as opposed to 1 slot, which comes on the Glock 19. The one thing that comes as kind of a drawback of this changed grip angle on the Timberwolf is there's less of a pocket for your support hand on the gun. So that's where traction starts to come into play. So traction is one of the ways that you control recoil through sinking the flesh of your support hand in the pocket that's left available behind your fingertips. Because they've reduced the length front to back, there's less place to get your palm on the frame and make contact with that traction, which wasn't that big a deal because the frame is shaped so well and lots of other pistols kind of share a grip profile like this. But smaller hander shooters who have issues with Glock frames are going to quite like this frame. For what it's trying to be, which is a lightweight concealed carry gun, I'd say that it accomplishes it well enough. However, if your hands are wet, you're not going to be able to get a lot of purchase from your support hand on the frame. So keep that in mind. Moving on to the slide and the sights. The slide work is pretty awesome in my opinion. Like the front of the slide looks like the Lonewolf logo that they used to have, like Howling, which is kind of cool. There's a triangle milled on the top of the slide, which kind of mimics the cut on the side. And the serrations are absolutely excellent. The barrel that came in the gun is a stainless steel barrel, which is kind of neat because when the slide is locked back, the little like Lonewolf logo peeks through the window at the side there, which is kind of neat. It does come with a full-length stainless steel guide rod, which is pretty cool. I'm a big fan of that, but Getting into that Glock geekery that I mentioned earlier, this is a Gen 3 slide on a Gen 4 frame. If you look at the mag button, it is a Gen 4 button. However, if you look at the itty bitty diameter guide rod, this is a Gen 3 slide. And the way they got that to work is there's a little piece of plastic that presses in at the front of the frame, which allows it to be basically chamfered down to fit a Gen 3 slide. So the slide is a Gen 3 slide, however, the frame is a Gen 4 frame, which is kind of neat. Back to the sights, which I've already mentioned are the Glock U-notch sights, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I mean, they work acceptably well, and the slide is nitrided, which is an excellent weapon finish, and it's going to hold up to holstering no problem. Since they took 4 ounces out of the slide, the gun cycles really fast. We'll get into that in shooting, but the balance has changed. It's pulled it kind of further back over the trigger guard, which feels pretty good. All in all, I appreciate the slide and kind of how it looks. There's not a bunch of roll marks on it. It doesn't even have Lone Wolf's logo basically anywhere on it. The only place it shows up is when you take the slide off the gun. So moving on to the trigger is a super basic Glock 19 Gen 3 style trigger. There's nothing pretty remarkable about it. However, it is a smooth trigger face as opposed to the serrated face that traditionally comes on the OG Austrian. The trigger safety does not go flush with the face of the trigger, just like a Glock, and the reset is very short and tactile, just like a Glock. So describing what a good trigger is going to feel like, there is going to be a very light take up to a very firm wall that you will build pressure on until the trigger releases. It's going to be very crisp, like a little glass rod snapping. There's going to be a small amount of over travel, and then if the trigger travel is very short, then the reset doesn't matter that much. However, if there's a good bit of over travel, which there typically is on a service pistol, then it needs to have a positive reset that helps you reset the gun and get ready to fire again. So this trigger, you've got your take up, and it's kind of honestly a little bit heavy. And then you hit the first part of the wall, and then you kind of swish through it to the back part of the wall until the trigger breaks. So the first part of the wall is kind of a false wall. You kind of have to push through it, which is lifting the firing pin block out of the way, and you can actually feel that happening on the trigger if you pull slow enough. Then when you get to the actual part of the wall where the trigger breaks, and it's a very small amount of over travel, the reset is quite positive with a tactile audible click as you swing forward, and it sets the trigger at the same part where the wall started, so you have to squish through the firing pin block again. The trigger is stated by Lone Wolf as being 6.5 pounds, and on my trigger pull gauge, depending on where I pulled, I got between 6 and 6.5 pounds by pulling on the center of the trigger, and I got just at 5 pounds at the bottom of the trigger. My experience with pulling this trigger is it feels more like a 5-pound trigger than it does a 6.5-pound trigger. So it's a very shootable, very capable self-defense trigger, as it gives you a lot of tactile feedback. So I think it's actually quite appropriate for what the gun is trying to do. And putting it on the most objective and most expensive way to communicate a trigger pull to you, the Humble Marksman trigger rating system. This gun got a, I mean, it's all right. I can't even think of a good meme to make you guys laugh about. I mean, it's all right. It's kind of middle of the road. And moving on to the rest of the controls, as I've already mentioned, it comes with a Glock Gen 4 style mag release, which I quite like. It's better than a Gen 3 in my opinion. And it comes with a Glock 34 style extended slide stop, which I'm a fan of, although lots of people aren't fans because they say that they can't get the slide to lock back, or their grip causes the slide to lock in place too early. So that's gonna always be a mixed bag. And you left-handed people, sorry guys, there's nothing for you over here. Deal with it. So the shooting experience with the gun, you're probably thinking, that's a really light gun. I bet it hits you in the hand harder than the heavier guns that you're talking about. You'd be correct, it does actually. The frame, however, is set up so well that it causes it to return to zero very, very well. If you look at the string of fire where I was shooting, I mean, I was just using target focus shooting and observing my sights lift and return. Everything was looking good. When I finished shooting, I was like, oh man, did I really throw a mic on the third target? When I went up and looked at the holes, 2 of the holes were touching. That was a double tap where the holes came back on top of each other, and the accuracy on all the other targets was quite good. So I was actually pretty impressed with how the gun handled recoil, despite being a little sharper. And the reason it is a sharper recoil impulse is because the slide is so light, it opens up and accelerates so quickly, so there's more energy kind of hitting you in the palm than the heavier, slower recoil impulse of a heavier slide. Because the frame is set up so well, it's not a big deal. So all in all, I'm a big fan of how this gun shot. Now moving on to the concealed carry experience with this gun, because it is so much lighter, it fits in all the Glock 19 style holsters. It carries about like a Glock 19 with a small compact mag well. And for those of you who've never concealed carry a Glock 19, If you have doubts if your pants can accept an inside the waistband holster, there is a strong chance you can conceal carry a Glock 19. It's kind of the Goldilocks size where a decent loose fitting shirt and some pants that you can fit an inside the waistband holster in, you can usually hide it pretty well with very minimal printing. The fact that this weighs 4 ounces less than the OG Austrian is quite nice. I honestly like how this gun carries. Like I said, if it came with a red dot optic, I'd consider carrying it. But the texture, as I mentioned, isn't gonna tear up your belly. It's a little bit easier for me to draw a gun with this style grip angle from the appendix because you don't have to turn your wrist over quite as much when you're going to pull the gun out of the holster. So I like this grip angle better than the Glock grip angle, so I'm all on board with what they're doing here. Moving on to the Aftermarket. This is from Lonewolf, who makes aftermarket Glock stuff. They've got plenty of support for it. Anybody who makes Glock Gen 3 stuff is gonna work with this pistol for the most part. So the world is literally your oyster. You can have whatever you want since this is a Glock style pistol. So wrapping things up with the LTD19, but first, we need to discuss the sacred relationship between I, the content creator, and you, the subscriber. Now's a great time to subscribe if you haven't done so, and you did remember to hit that like button, right? So I make world-class firearms content, and you watch this content. As you consider your next idea for your multi-million viewer YouTube channel on cooking with pancake art, you use my logo in your next viral video using your pancake art so that all of the people on the internet who don't speak English will know of the great work done here on this channel. So the LTD19 is a solid pistol. If you were looking for just an iron-sighted gun that's a cut above a Glock 19, I think this is a good gun. One caveat, and I didn't have this issue potentially with the gun, but I've seen it in competition, is when magazine springs get worn out and a lot of people don't service their magazines. So if you use a standard Glock 19 magazine or 17 or whatever it is, and the mag spring needs to be changed, this gun is cycling so fast it could potentially cause some timing issues leading to some feeding issues where the slide starts coming in on the round before it's all the way in the chamber, causing kind of like a failure to feed. If you stay on top of your mag springs, I don't think you'll have any issues with it. However, it is something to be cognizant of. I do wish, as I mentioned in the beginning, I do wish it came with, you know, a little bit nicer sights and a little bit nicer trigger shoe. Like the trigger itself is fine, whatever, but a little bit more premium trigger shoe to really kind of complete the Gucci Glock sort of feel to the gun. I think what they did with the opening at the gun is awesome. I really like what they did there. I kind of like the two-tone between the stainless barrel and the black slide. And I love the slide cuts. Everything about the gun is well executed. I mean, it is a solid Glock 19 clone. So if you want an American-made Glock, this is a pretty solid one. Thanks for watching. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this video up here, and I've chosen this video down here for you, and we'll both be surprised by that. So look out for that. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.